What's up, YouTube? Fat Tony Gaming coming at you today with my buddy Dan. He's got a Nightmare Doll deck profile that he wants to show off for premium. So Dan, give me a little bit of inspiration as to why you decided to build this deck.
Well, Pale Moon was always a deck I loved, but back when I first started Vanguard, it was like the only deck that worked was Lukier, and she was ungodly expensive. So then Maggio came out. I bought the trial deck for that, fell in love with the clan, and then the next thing that came out that I really liked was Nightmare Dolls with the Alice and Catherine combo. So I made a deck around that, really liked how it worked, but it was always kind of meh, not amazing, but not horrible either. And then Premium came out, and things became amazing for the deck. Like, just new Alice alone and Excel with triggers, all that together equals this deck being 10 times as scary.
Alright, so why don't we take a look at the deck then?
Alright.
What are we going to start off with?
We'll start off with triggers.
Triggers, alright.
Keep things simple to start things off.
So what's your trigger lineup looking like here?
Trigger lineup is pretty simple. All of the Vieira crits, draw PGs, and for heals, let's fix that. For heals, I decided to go with 3 of the Vieira one and 1 of the counter charge / soul charger. Counter charging can be important in this deck, but you also need shield value if you're going up against something with early aggro.
Do you find yourself needing the counter charge a lot, or is it just like it's something that's helpful but not like 100% necessary?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Because like once you get this combo off and done with, you are basically not going to have any face-up damage.
Okay.
Alright, so moving on to the last grade 0 of the deck, we have the starter, Nightmare Doll Natalie. You have a few...
Oh god.
You right there?
Yeah.
Yep. You have a few starters that could work with this deck, but I find Natalie works the best by far. Her skill is Counterblast 1 and Send her to Soul. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 of them to Soul, and if that card is a Nightmare Doll, you can do the same thing one more time. You put the remaining 2 for the first one at the bottom of the deck, and then once you've done it the second time, you shuffle.
Okay.
I find her to be just an amazing way to just search out your game pieces and just throw them into Soul.
It's a good way to set up your in-Soul combo pieces.
Yep. Moving on to the grade 1s, we have 3 Midnight Bunny, the Stride Fodder for Pale Moon. She is rather important in the deck because you usually don't want to end up getting rid of your grade 3s because your grade 3s are extremely important in this deck, as I'll explain later.
Right.
But you also need room for your other stuff, which is why I have her at 3.
Right. And you know, in premium, striding is just so much of a tempo play that you don't want to miss out on it.
Exactly. Next, we have one of the main game pieces for this deck, Nightmare Doll Leslie. Her skill is that whenever your Nightmare Doll Alice goes to Soul, you can stand Leslie. Now, what makes this card extremely scary is you throw it on an Excel circle, and then swing with your Vanguard. If you can hit a critical trigger, give that to her, put it on an Excel circle. She is 27 and critical just like that. And with this combo, she will be swinging very often.
So a good restanding pressure unit.
Yep. The last grade, not the last one, second to last grade 1 is Nightmare Doll Juliet. Her skill is GB1 when she boosts Soul Charge. This deck doesn't have a lot of Soul Charging options outside of you're starting with Natalie and another grade 2 I'll explain later. So she can be somewhat useful as a booster, but you don't need to have super big soul like you usually do in, say, Hari.
Right.
So she's just there because she's useful. The last grade 1 of the deck is Nightmare Doll Lisa. She is 6,000 base, and her skill is GB1 when she's placed on rear guard from Soul due to the effect of a Workoroid, and basically all your Nightmare Dolls are Workoroids. Until end of turn, she gains 3,000 power, and then at the end of the turn, countercharge.
Okay.
With this deck, countercharging could be a really big save if your opponent survives your first onslaught of attacks. So getting the 9k power and countercharge is nice. I didn't have her at... I think I used to have her at 2 before Premium VR became a thing. But she became a bit more useful nowadays with Excel circles and stuff. So I bumped her up to 4. I can see putting her to 3 as an option because of the 6,000 power. And now we move on to the grade 2s. We will start off with another one of your important game pieces in this deck, Nightmare Doll Ginny, obvious 4 of. Her skill is that when she is placed on rear guard, from hand, soul, anywhere, you send her to soul, call out Nightmare Doll Alice from soul, and give Nightmare Doll Alice 5,000 power. This is extremely important because of Nightmare Doll Alice. The original combo for this deck, before New Alice became a thing, was you have Catherine on Vanguard and Nightmare Doll Alice on your rear guard. The old Alice was whenever it hits, you counterblast 1, send her to soul, call out anything other than Alice, which would be Ginny. So you call Ginny out with a skill, send Ginny to soul, call Alice back out with 5,000 power. And then with Catherine, if your attack with Nightmare Doll Alice misses, you send Alice to soul for a counterblast and then call Alice back out. So it's basically an infinite attack amount until you got no more face-up damage.
So it's an attack loop with counterblasts, basically.
Yep. So she is an obvious 4 of. Next we have Nitro Juggler. Although he's not a Nightmare Doll, he is a Workeroid, so he is still able to help with some of your things. I ran original original Nitro Juggler in this deck because he was just an on-play soul charge. This one is, when placed from hand, look at the top 2 cards of the deck, add 1 to soul, put the other on the bottom of the deck. While he won't work if you call him from soul, he's still a Workeroid that can help, and you usually are calling him from hand anyway, rather than soul.
And he's also one of your preferred ride targets, right? Because the effect also does work when placed on Vanguard,
yes.
Correct? All right.
Our next one is another important one, but not as important as, say, Ginny. Nightmare Doll Master Brenda. She is basically what gets you your field. Her skill, she has 2 skills. First, you send her to soul, and then call out a Workeroid, and that Workeroid gains the skill that when it goes to soul that turn, you can call out Brenda. Now, the main thing you do with this is send Brenda to soul, call out Ginny. Ginny's skill will activate as long as you have Alice and soul to immediately send her soul. Call out Alice with +5, and then because Ginny went to soul, call Brenda out. So she helps getting field, which is important for one of the strides that I'll explain later. But you cannot spam this with, say, Ginny, because she has an auto ability that when she's called to rear guard circle from soul, she loses her act ability until end of turn, which was a good way to balance her out. So she's important for getting your field set up for your stride, or just beforehand even. And now we move on to the grade 3s. First, your most important piece of the deck, Nightmare Doll Alice. 12,000 power, grade 3, Excel. She has 2 skills. First, when she's placed on Vanguard Circle, you can call a Workeroid from your soul and give it 5,000 power until end of turn. Now, Bushy Road says that they don't design cards with premium in mind, but I can't help but feel that was a lie when they came out with Alice, because in premium, you have so few Workeroids in the deck. I believe your only real ones are Alice, Jumping Jill, and Nitro Juggler.
Well, I feel like Jumping Jill is kind of like this.
Yeah.
It was designed for her to work with Jumping Jill, or if you ride over herself, she can call another copy out.
This is true, but that skill works amazing in your deck since almost all your units are Workeroids. And then we move on to the skill that makes Alice so incredibly cheeky, which is at the end of the battle she attacks, you counter blast 1, soul blast 1, throw Alice into soul, and then you call anything that isn't grade 3 from your soul to rearguard circle. So, original Alice was a 10k grade 3, didn't have Excel obviously, and
Mechanic didn't exist back then.
yeah, she was just, if she hits, throw her to soul to call out a non-Alice. This works infinitely better because it's just end of battle whether she hits or not. Sure, there's the added soul blast, but you usually have enough soul to make it work regardless. So you'll be calling her out, calling Leslie, and then basically throw Alice into soul after she attacks to restand your Leslie, swing with Leslie, Alice attacks, repeat over and over again until you run out of counterblast.
Alice call Ginny, call Alice,
Right.
restand Leslie. Oh, Alice goes in, restands Leslie, calls out Ginny. Ginny goes in, calls out Alice, and you generate. That's 2 extra attacks you
Yes.
generated. And like you said, it's basically 2 extra attacks for every counterblast you have.
Yep, and like I said earlier, if you just get a critical trigger and put it on Leslie, she becomes infinitely scarier. Leslie actually used to be mainly a booster for Alice because sure, you could get a trigger and get up to 12k. Your opponent gets a trigger though, and that's gone. But with Excel and 10k triggers, that she just became so much better as an attacking unit. Next, we have Nightmare Doll Catherine. Now, as I explained earlier in the video, her skill is Counterblast 1, Counterblast 1 at the end of the battle that your Alice did not hit. You send Alice to soul to call Alice back out. And she also gives all Nightmare Doll Alice's plus 1000 power. And this is a Vanguard only skill. She used to be your absolute necessary ride target. You do not ride anything else other than her. This is not the case anymore because of new Alice being able to go to soul whether it hits or it doesn't hit. But Catherine is still an important piece. She's good as a ride target if you can get her off because A, she gets 1000 power to all Alice's, which helps you hit force numbers.
That's
And
always a good
then
thing.
with her on-ride skill, you search her deck for any one card and throw it to soul, which I don't think I need to explain why that's good. Sure, she doesn't have Excel, but you usually ride her after you get an Excel circle out.
Yeah.
Now, I cut her down to 2 instead of 4 because you really want that first ride Excel. So I threw in Golden Beast Tamer at 2 to give you more chances of hitting Excel. Sure, she is not a workeroid, but you don't absolutely need to have a workeroid Vanguard. So I mostly throw her in for the ride target if I do not have Alice in hand to ride.
Plus, she can also be good early pressure if you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't use her on attack skill that often in this deck. It's useful, but then again, I don't really ride her that often because I'm usually able to ride Alice. Now we will move on to the G-Zone. Our first card in the G-Zone is a 4 of Nightmare Doll of the Abyss Beatrix. You really don't need her at 4, you don't need her at 4, but the G-Zone space with this deck is so ungodly free that I just throw her in at 4 of anyway. Her skill is that at the end of the battle she attacked, you send her to the G-Zone face up and send 3 of your Workeroid rear guards to soul. You then call out 2 Workeroids to rearguard circle. Now, how she used to work was you play her on Catherine, attack with her, get your Alice and Leslie out, and then since she goes to G-Zone face up after the battle, you have Catherine as your Vanguard circle, so you can stride and still make use of Catherine. Now, like Catherine, she is not absolutely necessary, but she's still pretty useful because she doesn't cost a counterblast. This other one does cost a... Actually, we get to him afterwards. Sorry.
Well, I mean, with her, like, free multi-attacks are still free multi-attacks.
Yes, you get free... You get... I'll go into it anyway.
It's kind of like a limited reverse Masquerade Master. So
Yeah, like I said, you have Masquerade Master Hari. I keep him at 4 of for very obvious reasons in this deck.
I mean, I feel like it's a staple stride in Pale Moon at this point.
Yeah.
You know, just generating 2 extra attacks or 3 extra?
2 extra attacks because actually it can be 3.
It can be 3 if you call it the Excel Circle.
Yeah, his skill is actually, in a sense, the opposite of Beatrix. He doesn't go to G-Zone face-up, but when he attacks, you counterblast 1, send 2 of your rear guards to Soul, and then call out 3. However, this is a Magia skill, so they go to Soul at end of turn.
Should also be noted he does have to flip himself face up for that.
Yes, which is why I run him at 4.
Beatrix does not flip anything. She just does her thing as long as you have a Nightmare Doll heart.
Yep. Masquerade Master was literally everything Pale Moon could ever want. He works in Silver Thorns, Hari, Nightmare Dolls, whatever.
And he works best in a Magia-centric build because of the continuous, but regardless, being able to generate extra attacks is super important in Pale Moon.
The Power Plus to Magia units really isn't important in this deck because I don't run any Magia units. Next, we have the other Nightmare Doll, Nightmare Doll of the Abyss, Eleanor. You usually aren't striding into her unless you need to. She's a soul fixer in a sense because you take a Workoroid from your G zone and flip it face up, so you'd usually be flipping a Beatrix or another copy of herself, but I only run 1 of because if you have to stride into her twice, you're pretty much dead. You then take a card from your hand and throw it into Soul. You look at the top 10 cards of your deck and you take a grade 3 Workoroid, which is going to be Alice or Catherine. And then you have 2 choices. You can either throw it into your Vanguard circle as a heart, in which case you take your current heart and throw it to the drop zone, or you add it to Soul. Now, nowadays you're usually using this to just grab an Alice, throw her into Soul, but that's only if your Soul is bad.
And no, placing the unit as the heart does not cause gifts to trigger. It is not being ribbon.
Which is a really big shame, because I would love it if that was the case.
Well, that was the case, then Legioning with something that had an imaginary gift would allow that to proc too. So, I could start getting free things, free force markers with great Dayush.
Another stride that I sometimes use, just for fun, is Parallel Megatrick Fairfield. Now, his skill is Generation Break 3, Counterblast 2, choose a card from your Soul and your drop zone, and send them to the deck. You call a card from Soul, give it 10,000 power and +1 critical. It goes back to the Soul at the end of the turn, but it also gains a skill that you can Soul Blast 2 to give it 5,000 power and make it unable to be targeted by card effects. This can be good in the case that you are fighting Kagero, because Denial Griffin absolutely murders this deck.
Fun fact, that's a great card to set up a Leslie combo with, and gives you an immediate 17k 2 crit Leslie.
Exactly. 27 and
if you call it to an Excel circle,
if you took Excel circle. The problem with it is, though, it's Counterblast 2, and your Counterblasts are very important in this deck. So you usually might want to go into Nightmare Doll of the Abyss Beatrix instead to generate more multi-attacks, so you're not wasting your counterblasts. But if you're just trying to seriously hurt your opponent and get some damage in, Fairfield might be your better choice because of that critical. That way you don't have to bet on getting a critical trigger to give Leslie just that on-hit 2 damage. The Soul Blast skill it gives, I should mention, since it can't be targeted by card effects, that includes triggers. So that isn't always the best option to use, but it can be. Plus, you don't have a huge amount of soul as it is.
Yeah, but like you said, that's primarily for, again, going against decks that have interaction that can actually stop your combos from going off.
Yeah, because your opponent cards with G-Guards and stuff that just interrupt your combos murders this deck. It was a huge problem for it before, and even with the new support, we got a huge boost to our offense, but defensive-wise, we did not gain any type of resist or anything. Next up, we have the Generation Break 8, Scream Dragon Master, Droll Kimberly. You're usually not going to end up going into her anyway, because you should be killing your opponents way before you go to GB8, but I throw her in just for the fun of it. Her skill is that when she attacks a Vanguard, you call 5 cards from your soul to rearguard circle. They each gain 5,000 power and become Abyss Dragons. And then Droll Kimberly gains the skill that she gains 10,000 power for each of your Abyss Dragon rearguards. So you basically call 5 things, give them all +5, and then Droll Kimberly gains plus 50,000. Like I said, you're usually not going to go into her very often, or ever really, but she's nice to have as a possibility.
Yeah, it's there. Like in those weird games where you open up all of your heal triggers and you just go G-guard everything. Oh look, I'm at GV7.
Yep. And with your G-Zone space, like I said earlier, you don't have a lot of cards that are like absolute necessities in this deck, so you're pretty much free to do whatever you want with your G-Zone space after you throw in like Beatrix and Hari. Next, like I was saying with G-Zone space, I decided to have 5 G-Guardians because it gives me options. Now, let's start with Dawning Harlequin Maja. She isn't going to give you any shield because her skill is that if you have a Magia Vanguard, which you will never have in this deck, you gain 5,000 shield, and then you can call something from rearguard, and then it goes to soul end of turn. But the thing is, if you don't have a Magia rearguard, Soul Charge 3, which is very helpful in Nightmare Dolls if you're trying to set up your soul for stuff. Downside, she doesn't gain shield, but if you're just guarding anything that can be just guarded with 25k shield, and then you're fine.
You mean 15k shield?
15k shield. Yeah, I don't know why I said 25k. No. Next we have Chainsaw Megatrick Furnival. He was the first G-Guard for Pale Moons, and he was everything we wanted. His skill is, when placed on Guardian Circle, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add one of them to Soul, and put the others on the bottom of the deck. If the card you added to Soul was a grade 1 or higher, add 5,000 to his shield. Just checking top 3 cards and adding one to Soul is always great in any Pale Moon deck. I run him at 1 of because I find Maja's Soul Charge skill is far more useful most of the time. And 5k shield isn't going to make too much of a difference a lot in this deck. Next up, we have Jester Demonic Dragon Wandering Dragon. His skill is that when placed, you Soul Charge 1 and then call a card from your soul to Guardian Circle. He can be very important because you will always end up with the possibility of Soul Charging a trigger unit. And with increased shield values, that's plus 15 or plus 20 if you call out a heal trigger. And the Soul Charge can be very nice. So he's going to be your main Guardian. I can see running him at 2. I run him at 1 because I like to have my options.
Yeah, I was just about to ask why you're only running 1 if he's become so much better with the new triggers and stuff like that.
Like I said, games aren't going to last long enough where he's too important, but he's
That's fair.
1 of, and I can't fault anyone for wanting to run it 2.
Right.
You might take out a Maja and throw a second one of him in instead, or just take out Beatrix and throw a second one of him in instead. Because, like I said, you really don't need 4. I just have it in for shits and giggles.
You just have it to flex because it's a $20 card.
I can't believe it is a $20 card because you don't even need it anymore. It's nice to have, but you don't need it. At best, you really only need 1 of it, maybe 2 to have something to flip for Eleanor.
Welcome to our shitty secondary market.
Pretty much. The final G-Guard of the deck is Kinetic Megatrick Coulthard. His skill is that when placed, you flip a G-Guardian, and then if you have 4 different grades in your soul, in other words, if you have at least 1 grade 0, 1 grade 1, 1 grade 2, and 1 grade 3, he gains 15,000 shield. So he is arguably even bigger shield than Wandering Dragon at some times, and he's usually easy to get off because you should almost always have 1 of each grade in soul. In this deck, it's getting a grade 0 that's honestly hard because you're usually going to be soul blasting your zeros because everything else is usually some sort of combo piece.
Yeah, he's kind of unfortunate. I kind of wish he was like he gained 5K for every grade in your soul.
Oh,
that would have been significantly better in my opinion.
I mean, that's plus 20k shield, but yeah, 5k shield can always make a difference in this game.
Yeah.
That is all of the cards for this deck. I hope you enjoyed it, and for any of you potential Pale Moon players, I hope this deck helps you. It's not the greatest Pale Moon deck. I will stand by the fact that Hari, or perhaps even a Vieira version of a premium version of the new Vieira stuff is nice. Those will probably work better than this, but outside of Beatrix, this is a fairly budget build in comparison, and really fun if you're playing at locals.
Calls it budget. Running 4 copies of $20 card.
I mean,
has 2 SVR Golden Beast Tamers.
I mean, I pulled those 2 SVR Beast Tamers.
And I know you've had the Beatrixes forever.
I got Beatrix back when she came out.
Yeah,
and she was like not even $5.
I just got a bust on you.
If I said I was annoyed that the school was closed, would you guys believe me?
Probably.
I am.
It's a great way to end the video. Our buddy Max just walked in. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed the video. Quick note before we cut it off. What would you say is like the biggest problem this deck has, aside from damage triggers?
Yeah. Going back to that one video you may have seen between me versus One Punch D Police, God, that deck is scary. This deck does not take early aggro well. But our biggest concern is going to be anything that can interrupt your plays mid-battle phase, most notably Denial Griffin. Kagura will just murder you. This deck will usually lose to it, sadly.
Yeah, and also, especially since not a lot of your stuff goes back in and it stays out, if they start blowing up your pieces, it's probably going to hurt, right?
Yeah. As with any aggro deck, your opponent getting damage triggers is always an issue, so you usually want to start your Alice, Leslie, Ginny combo when your opponent's at 3 damage. You still might do it early game to try and push them hard, because the thing is with Natalie, if you can get Alice into Soul with that skill and you have a Ginny in hand, you can usually just start off combos early on and push your opponent pretty hard early on. So it's a great way to set things up for your early win.
All right.
If you have any other ideas for Nightmare Dolls, please leave a comment. I would be very interested in seeing what some other people are running for their builds. Leave a like for Anthony DeGesso.
Fat Tony Gaming, damn it.
Fat Tony Gaming, sorry. He is a really awesome guy with these vids. I thank him again for letting me do this. And his vids are always fun to watch. So please leave a like and comment and subscribe.
All right, guys. I will catch you guys later then. Dan, thank you for the deck profile.